Hey guys, tonight we slip into something truly absurd. The soft hush of a candle-lit medieval bedchamber, velvet curtains billowing, and wait, what's that staring at you from the bedpost? Oh, just a falcon, with a little leather hood, breathing slowly, like it's meditating. You're not dreaming yet, but the people of this castle desperately want you to be. It's late, somewhere between midnight and why are you still awake? And you've been invited into the world of nobles who believed falconry could double as a sleep aid. Yes, falcons. The majestic, sharp-taloned murder kites of the sky. Someone thought that was what your REM cycle needed. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far and wide we drift. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a stone corridor lit with flickering torches, the air warm with the smell of old hay, lavender sachets, and a faint note of bird. You're ushered through a thick oak door into the private sleeping chamber of a minor noble. The room is larger than most peasant cottages, and the centerpiece is a towering canopy bed draped with embroidered linens. Thread count? Let's call it medievally ambitious. But all that finery pales next to the absurdity waiting atop the carved wooden headboard. A fully grown peregrine falcon, hooded, regal, and deeply unamused. The noble, lounging under an embroidered coverlet depicting St. Cuthbert wrestling Insomnia, probably, assures you this is part of his nightly wind down. Falconry, he claims, offers cleansing focus. Something about watching a raptor breathe slowly beside you is supposed to train your mind to do the same. You try not to blink too loudly. This wasn't entirely out of left field in the Middle Ages. Nobles prized falcons as status symbols. They were costly, exotic, and infamously temperamental. Basically the Ferraris of the feudal world, except with talons. But somewhere along the line, someone decided to bring the birds into the bedchamber. Historians still argue whether this trend began as a genuine sleep remedy or simply as a sign of wealth. But there's no denying the records. Nobles kept falcons nearby at night. And not just locked in the next room. They were perched near the foot of the bed or nestled on specially designed stands covered in embroidered cloth. You tiptoe closer and notice a little tray of treats, tiny slivers of raw meat, a goblet of watered-down wine, and a few lavender blossoms scattered like potpourri. The falcon twitches. You twitch harder. Why would anyone think this helped with sleep? Well, some believed the rhythmic breathing of a sleeping bird could soothe the heart. Others thought falcons, trained to be calm in chaos, radiated composure. Medieval manuals occasionally reference night-rested birds as omens of good fortune or spiritual calm. There's even a fringe text suggesting falcons could absorb the sleeper's unrest and carry it away, like a very dangerous dream catcher. And then there's the class factor. If peasants were rocking back and forth in hay piles, nobles wanted a more luxurious insomnia. You're awake at 3 a.m.? I choose to be, with my falcon. It's the original humble brag. But there's a problem. Falcons are not quiet. They rustle. They chirp. They shift around on their perch with the subtlety of a toddler in a sugar crash. One wrong flick of the wing, and you're up with a face full of feathers and a bird glaring at you like you're the problem. One chronicler wrote of a duke who woke with a talon mark upon his cheek and a new fear of beaks. That sounds like an understatement. You lie down anyway. The noble insists you try it, Just breathe. You glance sideways at the falcon. It huffs. You huff louder. The silence is so thick you can hear the distant snoring of servants 2 corridors away. And just as your eyes begin to droop, scream. The falcon, in its sleep, lets out a single, echoing cry. You sit bolt upright. The noble mumbles something about adjustment periods and burrows deeper into his silken sheets. You start to suspect this might not be the miracle solution it was sold as. But here's the kicker. This wasn't a one-time fluke. Historical records, albeit scattered and cryptic, mention falcon night pairing rituals in noble courts from France to Hungary. One late 13th century guide even recommended a pre-bed strapping routine, which sounds more like sports therapy than slumber prep. There's also the strange case of Count Wilhelm of Thuringia, who reportedly insisted on having 2 falcons at either side of his bed to balance the energies. His physician noted that Wilhelm still averaged less than 3 hours of sleep, but was spiritually aligned. That's one way to spin sleep deprivation. And let's not forget the poor servants. They were the ones tasked with cleaning feathers off the sheets, fetching extra meat snacks at ungodly hours, and occasionally retrieving falcons, who decided to relocate to the rafters mid-dream. One diary entry from a chambermaid named Isabel reads simply, "Bird loose. Lord snoring. I weep." You can almost hear her. Still, there's something strangely charming about it all. The image of a noble, curled up with his dreams and a slightly judgmental bird, trying to convince himself he's found the secret to perfect rest. It's so very human. Because haven't we all tried weird things to fall asleep? White noise machines, weighted blankets, those oddly specific ASMR videos of someone pretending to be your medieval barber. Just me? In that context, falconry doesn't feel so bizarre. Okay, it's still bizarre. You glance again at the falcon. It's perfectly still now, head tucked under wing, feathers rising and falling like the slow tide of some tiny carnivorous sea. And for one moment, just one, you do feel a flicker of calm. Then it sneezes. You're still recovering from the falcon's sneeze when the noble gestures toward a low, carved table at the foot of the bed. "Now," he whispers, like he's letting you in on an ancient secret. "We take the saffron milk." You're handed a goblet, warm to the touch, gold-tinged, and faintly floral smelling. Steam curls from its surface like incense. It's supposedly the perfect pairing, a gentle draft for the body and a feathered guardian for the soul. You sip. It tastes complicated, like someone tried to mix a latte with bathwater and a pinch of medieval ambition. The noble smiles serenely. He's already dabbed a bit of rosewater behind his ears, something his apothecary claims soothes the beast in the belly. And because this is very on brand for the era, he's also massaged a blend of crushed chamomile, vinegar, and, yes, minced garlic onto the falcon's talons. It calms him, he insists. You nod politely while edging further from the bird. This entire sleep ritual is an aromatic avalanche. Every surface glows with herbal bundles. Lavender, thyme, poppy seed, lemon balm. A bowl of smoldering frankincense fills the room with heady swirls, while a servant wafts it with a goose feather fan. Your nose twitches. It's like being seduced by a medieval apothecary who got locked in a birdhouse. Turns out, scent was a big deal in medieval sleep theory. Physicians believed the air you breathed shaped your dreams. Sweet aromas were thought to invoke calming thoughts and invite prophetic visions. The 14th century Tarquinum Sanitatis advised lavender sachets for dreamless sleep, and myrtle oil if you desired nocturnal clarity, which sounds like a scented invitation to lucid dreaming. Falconers, never ones to miss a trend, soon began dressing their birds accordingly. Velvet hoods infused with sandalwood, perches wrapped in sage-soaked linen, and even talon pomades made from rendered goose fat and marjoram. Yes, they moisturized their birds. That's love. But did it help anyone sleep? Historians still argue whether the effect was psychosomatic or simply part of an elaborate display of wealth. After all, if you were fabulously rich and bored, why wouldn't you perfume your falcon like a Venetian courtesan? You lie back, the scent cocktail swirling around you, and try to center yourself. Breathe in, lavender. Breathe out, slight bird. The noble next to you mumbles a few lines of a Latin lullaby and closes his eyes. The falcon doesn't move, except to yawn. Did you know falcons can yawn? You do now. It's unsettlingly human. You glance up. Above the bed hangs a small bronze censer, swinging ever so slightly. Inside it, crushed opium pods and benzoin gum are slowly baking into the air. An expensive blend reserved for insomniacs with particularly generous purse strings. Or, in this case, someone convinced that sleeping near a gently sedated bird is the path to nightly transcendence. This was the intersection where noble medicine met mysticism. One chronicled case speaks of Lady Margareta of Bavaria, who insisted on bathing her falcon's feet in rosewater every evening before tucking him into a little perch quilt, embroidered naturally, with the phrase ad somnium passus, to the peace of sleep. Her physician, notably, described her sleep patterns as erratic, punctuated by loud avian disapproval. But the dream was alive. Not everyone found it soothing. You recall an odd letter from a traveling monk who visited a noble's estate in northern France. He described lying awake all night, his senses overwhelmed by air so sweet it turned to vinegar in the lungs, and a hawk who spoke once in Latin before diving off the bedpost. That last bit's probably metaphor, hopefully. Still, you marvel at the effort. This wasn't laziness or superstition. It was intentional, curated, even artful. They weren't just trying to fall asleep. They were trying to turn sleep into theater. And the falcon? It was the centerpiece, the floating candle, the dream sentry, the sleepy-eyed totem of aristocratic calm, even if it occasionally relieved itself mid-flight. Which brings us to a slightly less elegant detail. Perfumes weren't just for seduction or serenity. They were also, let's be honest, coping mechanisms. Falcons are not potty trained. These noble bedchambers, for all their silk and saffron, occasionally reeked of talon-borne accidents. Hence, the constant burning of herbs. Not just for dreams, but for dignity. You stir again in the sheets, trying not to disturb the sleepy predator beside you. The noble lets out a gentle sigh, and for a moment, it's easy to believe the entire setup is working. You're warm. You're drowsy. You're vaguely marinated in every herb known to medieval Europe. And just when your body begins to surrender to sleep, the falcon hiccups, loudly, like a hiccup-burp hybrid. You startle. He flaps once, glares at you, and tucks his head back under a wing with disdain. The noble doesn't stir. Either he's reached enlightenment, or he's passed out from inhaling too many resins. You reflect again on the logic. Maybe it wasn't about actually sleeping. Maybe it was about proving you'd tried everything, that you weren't just another lord tossing and turning in the dark. You had a bird. You had oils. You had gold-infused milk that, frankly, you might regret later. And who among us hasn't made a slightly questionable sleep decision at 2 a.m.? Whether this was medieval melatonin or simply aristocratic overkill, it tells you something oddly endearing about the human condition. The search for peace, for dreams, for a quiet moment, even if you have to share it with a creature that could remove your eyeball. You shift on the mattress, eyes growing heavy. The falcon makes a soft clicking sound in his throat, a sleepy tick, like a metronome in the dark. Click, 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 sleep. Might be thwip. The falcon stretches his wings dramatically, like a cat doing yoga, and you're wide awake again. Of course. At this point, your senses are so thoroughly marinated in herbs, smoke, and bird dander that you're not sure whether you're dreaming or slowly dissolving into medieval aromatherapy. You lie back, determined to give this feather-brained strategy one more chance. The falcon seems settled, and the noble's breathing has evened out into that low, rhythmic snore of someone who's either deeply at peace or completely unconscious from opium incense. And then it begins. From somewhere beyond the heavy curtains of the bedchamber, a sound stirs. Not the usual creak of a floorboard or hoot of an owl. No, this is something more unnatural. It's high-pitched, musical, almost, and unmistakably avian. A trilling warble slices through the air like a flute being strangled by a whistle. You bolt upright. The falcon reacts with an indignant fluff of feathers, the noble question mark still snoring. You scramble toward the window slit and peer into the torchlit courtyard. There, lit by moonlight and madness, is a man in a ridiculous feathered hat holding what appears to be a lute. He's whistling at a row of perched birds. Behind him, a small choir of servants hums a gentle, droning background note. The birds? Not falcons. These are finches, doves, and a few nervous-looking partridges. One sings along. Badly. You're witnessing what may be the worst sleep experiment in history. Welcome to the medieval trend of bedtime bird calls, a short-lived but deeply sincere attempt by nobles to coax sleep using the musical harmony of nightfowl. The logic, if you can call it that, goes something like this. If certain birds sound calming in the wild, why not recreate their calls in a curated, noble-approved chorus to guide the listener gently into dreamland? Unfortunately, no one told the falcons. See, falcons are solitary, moody creatures. They are apex predators, not karaoke partners. When subjected to the cloying chirps of domesticated songbirds, they don't mellow, they brood, or worse, retaliate. Historians still argue whether these night choirs were intended as a genuine medical remedy or simply an eccentric flex for noble guests. One theory suggests that the blend of live birdsong and subtle lute harmonies was believed to align the soul with celestial rhythms. Another, more grounded theory, posits that some nobles were just bored and liked making things up for their personal bards to justify. Regardless of origin, the practice left behind some absolutely golden historical footnotes. There's a famous letter from a frustrated physician at the court of Duke Alaric of Provence, who wrote, "The Duke insists the robin's call soothes his soul, but I insist it simply enrages the hawk. Tonight, the parrot was decapitated. Again." You step back from the window just as a partridge takes off in a flurry of wings and panic. Below, the falconer-turned minstrel strums one final, discordant chord and bows to an audience of 0. A servant steps in, hurriedly gathering the remaining birds before anyone else gets mauled. Back inside, the falcon on the headboard is visibly annoyed. It lets out a low kek-kek-kek, the avian version of muttering under its breath. You settle back into the bed, adjusting the linen to avoid the spot where the falcon had earlier expressed his feelings about the partridge soloist. Just as your head touches the pillow again, you notice a small scroll tucked beside it. Curious, you unroll it. It's handwritten in looping script. If the falcon startles you, close your eyes and whisper the song of stillness. Below are lyrics, 4 lines, in Latin. You try them aloud, softly. Dormis nunc, o ventus mitis, ave, falco, pax sit tibi, talones dormiant in pace, et nemes scalpere hodie. The last line, and do not scratch me today, tells you everything you need to know about how well this method works. And still, they tried. This wasn't the only musical innovation tied to falconry and sleep. Some nobles experimented with mechanical devices, early crank-operated boxes that whistled bird calls using tiny reeds and bellows, like cursed music boxes. One chronicler describes a night barrel that played an 8-minute falcon lullaby if wound properly. Another recounts a disastrous feast where such a contraption malfunctioned and sounded like a goose being slowly inflated. But perhaps the strangest attempt came from Queen Isolde of Aragon, who employed a full-time bird caller, a man paid solely to imitate falcon whistles with his mouth at bedtime. He wore a velvet cape, stood at the foot of the royal bed, and chirped until Isolde drifted off. He was eventually dismissed for overconfidence in owl impressions. Now, as the falcon beside you finally seems to relax, head bobbing slightly, you allow yourself to believe, for just a breath, that maybe all this wasn't entirely ridiculous. Maybe there is something primal in the call of the wild, some ancient memory tucked in your brain that hears a bird rustle and thinks, safety, nest, stillness. You roll onto your side. The falcon makes one last low warble. You answer with a half-muttered lullaby of your own. No Latin this time, just a modern hum, soft and off-key. And for a moment, just a moment, you start to drift, until the finch outside lets out a note so piercing it shatters the moment like cheap glass. The falcon screams. The noble wakes up swearing in old Occitan. And you, once again, are wide awake. You really thought this might be the moment. Soft lighting, half a yawn already sliding up your throat, and the falcon was finally quiet. Head tucked, feathers puffed into a perfect orb of noble-approved serenity. But then came the screech. The kind of noise that could startle crops into wilting. You groan softly as the noble leaps from his bed, dramatically clutching his falconry gauntlet in one hand and a candle in the other. He's agitated. He whispers, as though this isn't the most obvious thing in the world. We'll need the calming perch. Right, the calming perch. You trail him through a side chamber, its floor padded with woven mats and hay-stuffed bolsters. In the middle, beneath an arch of dried lavender, stands a 6-foot wooden perch wrapped in dyed wool and embroidered cloth. Beneath it, an open book, a bowl of honeyed oats, and a small prayer candle. You stifle a laugh. This is falcon yoga for insomniacs. The noble gently lifts the falcon onto the perch, which he explains is used for ritual calming. You nod like this is perfectly reasonable. He begins speaking softly, not to you, but to the bird. Your talons are strength, but not in this hour. Your wings are glory, but rest now. Let the hunt be dreamt. It's hard to say what's more surreal. The idea that a grown man is reciting bedtime affirmations to a bird, or the fact that it kind of works. The falcon blinks once, twice, then closes its eyes. And then, from behind one of the embroidered drapes, you hear the unmistakable clink of metal on metal. A shuffle, a cough, and then, emerging from the shadows like a knight from an Elizabethan fever dream, is a noblewoman in a nightgown, with a falconer's glove on both hands. She floats across the chamber like a ghost in silk, eyes narrowed, bird perched calmly on her wrist. "He prefers the southern perch," she says, motioning to the opposite end of the room. The noble stiffens. "This is my chamber tonight, Alaric." Her voice is serene, dangerous, like someone who's tamed both birds and enemies with equal grace. You shuffle backwards, very slowly, lest this devolve into a midnight duel involving sharp talons and passive aggression. Apparently, you've stumbled into one of the era's more obscure trends, the falcon glove nightgown ritual. Noblewomen in particular took a liking to incorporating falconry gear into their evening routines, not necessarily to hunt or even to train, but to bond with their birds in hopes that a shared emotional rhythm would lull both parties into slumber. It sounds utterly unhinged until you remember. Medieval medicine had no clue what melatonin was. They thought your humors could be calmed through proximity, through shared vibration, through feathered empathy. Falcon and falconer snoozing in spiritual sync. One preserved diary entry from Lady Seraphina of Devon states, "I keep my dear Regulus beside me in dreams. His breath warms my knuckles, and his twitchings soothe me." Never mind that falcons don't twitch so much as shudder violently. The point stands. Historians still argue whether this was medicinal, spiritual, or a thinly veiled competition in courtly weirdness. After all, nothing says, "I'm richer than you," like commissioning a lace-trimmed nightdress with hidden loops to secure a falconer's glove mid-bicep. And it wasn't just about fashion. Some noblewomen had bird-themed lullabies composed for these rituals. One particularly dramatic example includes a ballad titled "Talon Rest, Lady Dreams," a 4-minute harp tune meant to be performed while the falcon perched on the harp itself. Your current noble host, Alaric, is now visibly sulking, while the lady, her name is apparently Iseldra, moves her bird to the south perch and begins a soft incantation. It sounds like a bedtime prayer, but includes oddly specific instructions about not relieving oneself on the tapestries. The falcon stares blankly. You do too. What you're witnessing is the medieval version of couples therapy, conducted entirely through falcons. The tension in the room is suddenly undercut by the quietest little plop noise. Everyone freezes. The bird has pooped on the prayer candle. You wish you were surprised. Iseldra sighs like this is a Tuesday and tosses a handkerchief onto the mess without breaking eye contact. "He's still adjusting," she murmurs. You excuse yourself back into the main bedchamber, pretending not to hear Alaric hissing something about ruined energy fields. Lying back down, you begin to accept that no one here is getting any sleep tonight. Not because the falconry isn't working, but because everyone is just too committed to the bit. Still, there's something strangely touching about it all. These nobles weren't idiots. They were simply human, desperate for rest, security, and meaning. In a world without antibiotics, central heating, or Netflix, who could blame them for trying to find peace in feathers? And sure, it's a little wild to see a woman in pearls and wool socks cuddling a hawk like it's a therapy dog. But then again, what's really the difference between that and modern folks listening to whale noises through Bluetooth sleep masks? Your final thought before you almost drift off. Maybe falconry wasn't a failure in sleep science. Maybe it was performance art, a nightly ritual not meant to fix sleep, but to honor the effort. You feel your body grow heavy. The bed creaks softly. The falcon on the headboard makes one tiny, purring noise. And then, from the side room. Also, he prefers oats soaked in mare's milk, Alaric. You roll over and put a pillow over your head. You've stopped checking the time. It's somewhere between too late to be awake and too early to admit defeat. And you're now cocooned in linen sheets that smell faintly of lavender, meat juice, and the persistent memory of falcon flatulence. If that sounds impossible, congrats. You've never slept in a room with aristocratic bird handlers mid-crisis. You close your eyes. Again. And then comes the trumpet. Not a literal one, though at this point, would that even be surprising? No, this is the emotional trumpet of medieval drama. A door creaks open. A servant whispers, "My lords and ladies, they've assembled," and your noble host springs from the mattress with the enthusiasm of a man who's just remembered it's nap time dual hour. Yes, that's right. You are now part of the lesser-known but very real aristocratic phenomenon of sleep tournaments, competitions held at night, usually by candlelight, where nobles tried to prove who could fall asleep the fastest, the deepest, or in the most ridiculously symbolic way, all while accompanied by falcons. You trail after the noble, half asleep, into a grand hall where mattresses have been arranged in a loose circle around a central fire pit. Each noble is already in position, wrapped in embroidered quilts, a falcon at their side or on their chest, looking equally bored and confused. A man in a long velvet robe and a monocle, which must be purely decorative because monocles weren't a thing yet, steps forward and announces, "The contest of rest begins now. First to dream wins, last to twitch cleans the bird coops." This is apparently not a joke. You settle in on the outer ring because no part of you wants to be mistaken for a participant. But curiosity keeps your eyes wide open. The first noblewoman tries a reverse perch, placing her falcon directly on her belly, arms folded like she's about to be mummified. Another knight has his falcon resting across both shins, like some sort of medieval acupuncture gone rogue. A third lies on his side, whispering a lullaby involving milkmaids and harvest moons. And then, seriously, you see a scorekeeper. He's holding a wax tablet and a quill, marking down things like eye flutter +2, snore onset -1, and bird agitation disqualified. The falcons themselves are disturbingly cooperative, most of them nestled quietly, likely just as exhausted by all this as the humans are. Historians still argue whether these sleep duels were genuine competitions, ritualized courtship displays, or just high society nonsense invented after too much honey wine. But we have records of such events, typically called challenges of repose or dreaming rites. They occurred in noble courts from Aragon to Saxony, often following a feast and right before the long winter nights truly set in. The idea? That the deepest sleeper had the purest spirit. Or, alternatively, that whoever could fall asleep first had mastered their body and therefore deserved the best breakfast in the morning. That's right, this all might have been about cinnamon scones. There's even a story of a young count who cheated by slipping into an opiate-laced stupor before the tournament and was discovered only when his falcon began pecking his eyebrow in protest. The eyebrow was lost. The title of Lord of Drowse was revoked. You glance around the hall. Candles flicker. Somewhere, a falcon hiccups. The tension is thick, not because anyone's fighting, but because no one dares move. It is the quietest chaos imaginable, Suddenly, someone snores. It's a nobleman on the far end, mouth open, a falcon perched peacefully on his collarbone. The judge creeps forward like a medieval sleep ninja and holds a feather under the man's nose to check airflow. He nods solemnly. "We have a first sleeper." Polite applause erupts. Two people clap before they remember the rules and stop immediately. The judge scribbles down something dramatic on his wax tablet. The man is declared half-dream victor. There's apparently still a second round. You begin to feel the weight of it, not just your eyelids, but the whole absurd endeavor. How badly must one desire rest, true, uninterrupted rest, to turn sleep into a courtly sport? And yet, it makes a certain amount of twisted sense. Nobles competed at everything. Who could ride the farthest? Who could hold a pose longest? Who could own the most absurdly tiny dog? Why not sleep? Falconry, of course, added the layer of prestige. If you could drift into dreams with a raptor calmly nested on your ribs, surely you had achieved inner harmony, or at least had extremely confident bones. One scroll from Burgundy describes a triple perch rest duel in which 3 nobles tied falcons to their wrists and ankles and attempted to sleep suspended from silk hammocks. It ends with the sentence, "There were no survivors," which is probably metaphorical. Probably. Back in the hall, the second sleeper is declared a fraud after it's discovered he'd stuffed lavender inside his ear holes. The Falcon judge calls it olfactory doping. You're not making that up. This was serious business. As the fire dims and the room hums with barely suppressed yawns, you see one final noble attempt, a dramatic gesture, curling up with a falcon cradled against his cheek like a plush toy. It lasts about 3 seconds before the bird nips his nose and flies off to perch on a chandelier. You stifle a laugh. You're probably the only one still awake now, and that feels fitting. Because watching all of this, really watching it, you see the quiet desperation beneath the silk sheets and smug smiles. These nobles aren't just trying to win. They're trying to rest, to forget, to let go. And if it takes feathers, fanfare, and a judging panel, so be it. You lean back on your own cushion. The fire crackles. Somewhere, a falcon snores. Yes, they can snore, quietly. Don't Google it. Just accept it. Your body is heavy again. Breath slowing. This time, maybe. A sudden voice cuts through the dark. Point deduction, his bird just blinked too loud. You give up. You wake up, or maybe you were never really asleep, in what feels like the quietest place in the known world. The tournament hall has gone still, and someone has doused the fire. The nobles are scattered across the floor like so many bejeweled corpses of dreams unfinished, limbs dangling off cushions, falcons blinking in slow motion. But your host, Alaric, is already up. Of course he is. He beckons with a finger, all secrecy and stolen candlelight, as if he's about to lead you into a secret crypt full of forbidden scrolls. Instead, he opens a door carved with tiny falcon silhouettes and leads you into a hallway filled with birds. And not just any birds. Rows upon rows of falcons, hawks, and the occasional confused owl perch silently on tall stands, each draped in finely woven silks and delicately scented with herbs. Their hoods are hand-painted, many with tiny crescent moons or embroidered stars. The smell in here is like dried feathers soaked in frankincense and lavender water, somehow holy and avian and deeply weird. "Welcome," Alaric whispers, "to the whispering aviaries of Aquitaine." Because of course he calls them that. The room is soundproofed by layers of wall hangings and padded flooring, meant to keep the outside noise out and the bird noise in. But what's unsettling is what isn't happening. The birds aren't calling. Not even a single kick. Just a soft, eerie cooing sound, like a chorus of monks trying to hum in Falcon. You freeze. Alaric beams. Some have been trained to soothe sleepers, with whispered sound. You glance at one falcon. Its eyes are closed. Its beak moves ever so slightly. You edge closer, and then, clearly, gently, it hisses, "Rest, little knight, sleep nowt, or else." You recoil. Alaric nods proudly, mistaking your horror for awe. They've been trained with repeated phrases, only in falcon-friendly tones, of course. The soothing tongue. There's no such thing as a soothing tongue. You're surrounded by birds that whisper, on purpose, at night. One of them clicks its beak rhythmically, like it's counting seconds until your next mistake. Another lets out a breathy, "Sleep now," in a voice that is definitely a middle-aged man pretending to be soothing. Apparently, this was the height of sleep luxury among a certain class of nobles, especially those who believed in dream vigil spirits. These trained falcons were supposed to whisper protection spells, calming phrases, or even dream guidance cues. One noblewoman, according to an old court ledger, paid a falconer 5 entire goats and a small estate for a bird that could whisper her dead husband's name at dusk. It ended poorly. The bird mispronounced it. Historians still argue whether this was psychological trickery, a linguistic curiosity, or just the world's most ambitious sleep parrot scam. You walk past a perch with a bird who mutters something in what sounds like Old Norman. It might be peaceful wings, or it might be, I bite. You don't ask. A scribe's notes from 1298 describe these whisper falcons as divinely unsettling. One poor monk visiting a noble's estate wrote, "They whisper when you look away. I heard my name spoken in a voice I've never heard before. I am returning to the abbey at once." You'd go with him if you could, but Alaric continues, leading you deeper into the whisper aviary, past elaborate perches and bowls of honey water. He tells you how each falcon is trained to coo specific phrases over weeks of careful repetition by soft-spoken servants. "I once had one that hummed lullabies," he says, not without sadness. "But it took a mate and flew off, whispered only to her after that." The romantic tragedy of falcon pairing aside, you're trying not to focus on the sound of 30 whispering birds, softly speaking nonsense in overlapping cadence. It's like being trapped inside a very polite cult, and yet, part of you begins to understand. When every noise outside your chamber, wolves, wind, drunken nights dueling under moonlight, felt like a threat, maybe these murmurs were comforting, familiar, chosen, not the chaos of the wild, but a curated soundscape, like a Spotify playlist made entirely of haunted pigeons. The chamber begins to lull you, not into sleep exactly, but into something close, a trance. The sound becomes rhythmic, like a language you almost remember. Your breathing slows. The falcons don't move. And just when you feel the heavy tug behind your eyes, "Wake up, worm." You snap to full attention. One falcon has stepped slightly forward on its perch and is glaring directly at you. Alaric hurries over. "Ah, that one hasn't quite finished training." You think you've had enough whisper therapy for the night. As you step out of the aviary and back into the main hall, everything feels louder. The echo of your own footsteps, the creak of wood, the ordinary sounds of life return with force, but part of you misses the gentle menace of those murmurs. Maybe that's the trick. The nobles weren't seeking sleep. They were seeking silence with structure, control over the dark. Because what's more terrifying than the night? Its unpredictability. The quiet that doesn't obey. Unless you train it, mask it, feather it, and make it whisper nice things. Mostly, you return to your cot and collapse. It smells faintly of feathers and desperation. A falcon from the aviary has followed you and perched on a nearby stool. You eye it cautiously. It stares back. Then, softly, barely audible, it whispers, "Good night, idiot." Progress? You're barely coherent at this point. Your brain feels like warm cheese wrapped in velvet, but your body, against all odds, is still standing, now following Alaric down yet another hallway, this one lit with moonlight streaming through stained glass windows. The falcon who called you idiot is still tailing you from a polite distance, blinking at you like it has notes on your posture. Alaric is speaking again. You try to focus. It's not just about the birds, he's saying. It's about when the birds choose to rest. Of course it is. He leads you to a small tower room, round and bare, save for a tall lectern, several unrolled scrolls scattered like paper snowdrifts, and a globe-shaped device made of silver rings spinning gently in the breeze. It looks like something from an orrery or a particularly enthusiastic armillary catalog. You're now being inducted into the niche and glittery world of hawk-handling horoscopes and lunar nesting. Yes, astrology, but for falcons and sleep. Alaric gestures to the spinning sphere. This tells me when the moon is in its dreamward phase. Falcons sleep best under a waning gibbous. No one knows why. You stare blankly. He continues. Venus, in conjunction with the third nest, usually produces flighty dreams. But when Mars opposes Jupiter, oh, you'll sleep like a bishop. This all sounds like something a man once muttered into a bar napkin at 3 a.m. after too much absinthe. But here in this tower, it's sacred truth. In medieval noble circles, falconers and astrologers often worked hand in hand. Historians still argue whether this was rooted in true celestial observation or just the natural progression of a bored upper class with access to both birds and time. But there were patterns, or so they believed. Certain moons were thought to cause sky madness in falcons, making them restless or too eager to fly. Other lunar positions were considered soft perch alignments, during which birds and humans alike could enter gentle, prophetic sleep cycles. Some nobles even kept diaries comparing their falcon sleep to planetary movements, writing things like, "Falcon restless, full moon, dreamt of bees, coincidence?" You look down. One of the scrolls is covered in tiny falcon-shaped symbols, each paired with a symbol for the moon phase, followed by mysterious squiggles that might be shorthand for dream types. There's one entry that simply reads, "New moon, falcon defecated, very bad omen." These lunar theories extended beyond simple observation. Some nobles went as far as constructing moon-facing nesting alcoves for their falcons, complete with glass roofs or mirrored ceilings, to catch the planetary influence. It's part superstition, part early sleep science, and entirely committed to the aesthetic. Alaric shows you a chart that maps out falcon dream cycles against phases of Mercury. He taps the paper like it explains everything. You see, when the planet of messages passes through Aries, falcons remember dreams more clearly. And if they sleep deeply, you do too. You nod very slowly, like someone being told that their dreams depend on a bird's dream, which in turn depends on the position of a planet that no one can actually see. At this point, you're not sure whether you're skeptical or just extremely sleepy. Alaric pulls out a small velvet pouch and begins sprinkling herbs across the windowsill. Rue and mugwort, he says, to strengthen third nest insight. That sounds suspiciously made up, but mugwort was used in medieval times to encourage vivid dreams, even lucid ones. You're handed a piece of parchment with symbols drawn in charcoal. Your personal Falcon sleep glyph, Alaric explains. You'll want to burn it before dawn if you hope to dream without interruption. You consider eating it instead, and then you see it. Near the window sits a tiny perch, and on it, resting calmly in a bowl-like basket, is a falcon chick, still downy, blinking slowly, and beside it, a small crystal prism and a silver charm shaped like a crescent moon. The baby falcon yawns. It's weirdly adorable, maybe even relaxing, because despite everything, the chanting birds, the scented talons, the planetary nonsense, there's something ancient and oddly soothing about the idea that the stars and the birds in your sleep are all part of one tangled celestial quilt. So you sit beside the baby falcon. You watch its breathing slow. The night sky presses gently against the glass above, and for a flicker of a moment, you start to believe. Maybe it does matter what Jupiter's doing. Maybe the way this tiny bird folds its wings affects how your dreams unfold. Then the falcon chick lets out a hiccup so forceful, it falls sideways into its own moon charm. You and Alaric both blink. Well, he says softly, Mercury is in retrograde. You're guided back down the tower stairs, carefully because your legs are now functioning at the speed of medieval bureaucracy, and re-emerge into yet another section of the estate. This one smells like old parchment, crushed herbs, and something faintly lemony. Before you can ask, Alaric turns a corner and gestures dramatically. This, he announces with the weary pride of someone who's been laughed at by the Royal Medical Guild, is the chamber of soothing drafts. Potions. You step inside and are immediately greeted by the clink of glass and the soft bubbling of a dozen tiny cauldrons. Shelves line the stone walls, each crammed with vials, herbs, dried lizards, and labels written in the kind of calligraphy only a bored monk could maintain. You try to read one. Essence of falcon feather in rainwater steeped beneath the waning moon? You mutter. Alaric beams. Excellent for lucid dreaming. Tastes like celery soup mixed with regret. You're no stranger to strange medieval elixirs. People once drank powdered emeralds to cure stomach aches. Nobles in Spain swore by wine infused with crushed pearls to ease the humors. And of course, who could forget the classic Roman remedy? Fermented fish sauce mixed with honey. For sleep. Historians still argue whether these tonics were meant to actually induce sleep or simply knock out the drinker with sheer psychological force. But Alaric insists falconry-focused sleep drafts were different. This isn't just apothecary work, he says, handing you a flask that smells like a pigeon's armpit. This is bonded herbalism, sleep by sympathy. You drink what your falcon drinks. You hesitate. He nods solemnly. Yes, the falcons drink too. This is apparently the theory behind a whole genre of medieval sleep tonics known as ether-pairing elixirs, designed so that both human and falcon experience the same bodily state at bedtime. One 14th century noblewoman claimed her hawk became too excitable at night unless they both drank boiled rosewater with valerian and ground stag antler. Another baroness experimented with echo infusions, where she'd sip a tea and the falcon would simply smell it, in the belief that scent alone could create shared slumber rhythms. You blink. Alaric's eyes glitter with the kind of enthusiasm only found in people who think saffron can cure heartbreak. "Watch this," he says. He pours a small greenish mixture into a tiny silver dish, places it beside a perched falcon, and waits. The falcon sniffs, blinks, then immediately turns around, fluffs its feathers, and falls asleep so hard it topples gently off the perch, lands in a heap, still snoring. You look at the green mixture. "What's in that?" Alaric looks vaguely guilty. "Mostly poppy, and maybe wine, a splash. So, a falcon tranquilizer." Apparently, nobles weren't above lacing their birds and themselves with a cocktail of mild narcotics, herbs, and what Alaric calls dream-summoning essences. The recipes varied wildly, but recurring ingredients included chamomile, lavender, myrtle, crushed almonds, and occasionally bezoars, those weird hairball stone things pulled from animal stomachs, once thought to neutralize poison and, according to one very persistent French count, banish dream goblins. Alaric offers you a taste from a blue glass vial. You sip. It tastes like moss and apple cider that's gone through emotional trauma. Oddly calming, though. There's a recipe book on the table, filled with hand-drawn birds curled around vines, each page listing increasingly questionable mixtures. One tonic claims to impart winged dreaming if taken with a single feather placed under the tongue. Another suggests fasting for a full moon cycle before consumption to ensure falcon mind purity. You close the book slowly. Not all nobles had access to such refined techniques. A German knight's sleep journal from 1317 describes him simply crushing dandelions into his wine and hoping for the best. Meanwhile, a Florentine noblewoman insisted that sleep only came after she massaged her temples with a paste made from fig sap, ground oyster shell, and falcon droppings. She died single. Still, there's no denying that some of these methods did result in sleep, or something like it. You sit back on a stool, head feeling floaty from the green stuff. Alaric hands you a small cloth sachet. Inside, dried flowers, lemon balm, what might be cinnamon bark, and a single pale feather. "Put this under your pillow," he murmurs, "and let the falcon dreams come." You look at the feather. You look at the bird snoring into its water bowl. You look at Alaric. This man has never slept poorly in his life. And yet, part of you wonders, after hours of bird whispers, astrological talon charts, and now matching sleepy potions, whether the nobles ever slept naturally at all. Whether their obsession with falconry as sleep art wasn't about sleep, but control, ritual, the desperate attempt to craft a dream instead of surrender to it. Because when you spend all day watching birds hunt and all night trying to train them to whisper lullabies, maybe you're not avoiding nightmares. You're just inventing different ones. You yawn. The feather sachet smells like warm hay and fading candlelight. The falcon beside you lets out a soft burble in its sleep. Somewhere behind you, a cauldron gives a final hiss. And for a moment, you don't know if you're still awake, or if this is just a dream about a falcon dreaming about you. You don't remember standing up, but suddenly you're walking again, or maybe just gliding, and Alaric is holding open a small door at the end of a very narrow hallway. The stone here is warmer, somehow, as if the room ahead were absorbing dreams like a sponge. "Welcome," he whispers, to the hall of harmonized slumber. You're too tired to comment on the name. He ushers you into a long, low-ceilinged chamber lined with what appear to be a series of raised wooden nests. Not falcon perches. These are too large. Each one is padded with silk and straw, shaped like the inside of a giant walnut. Above each rests a small suspended cradle, gently swinging from the rafters, and in those, falcons, dozens of them, sleeping in midair like feathered pendulums. What fresh fever dream is this? Alaric sees your face. It's called co-resting. We invented it after someone fell asleep watching a falcon dream. She claimed to wake up 3 years younger. You raise an eyebrow. He shrugs. Anecdotal, but compelling. You pick your way carefully through the room, where human-sized nests sit next to avian ones, pairs, like dance partners in repose. This is the noble experiment known as sympathetic nesting. Nobles and falcons, not just trained together, but sleeping together. In the PG-13 sense, relax, in coordinated environments. The theory? That when two creatures share a rhythm of breath, temperature, and rest, their nervous systems sync, leading to deeper, longer, and more vision-rich sleep. Did it work? Historians still argue whether this was an early precursor to modern sleep therapy, or just rich people snuggling birds out of boredom. Alaric beckons you toward an unoccupied nest. You lie down reluctantly, then melt. The mattress is stuffed with goose feathers and something faintly aromatic. You recognize the smell, lavender perhaps, or elderflower, or just medieval wishful thinking. Above you, your designated falcon swings gently in its cradle. It blinks at you once, then tucks its head under its wing. The room is nearly silent, save for the gentle creak of rope swings and the soft rustling of feathers. There's a hush to the air, as if even the stones are trying not to wake the birds. In the 1300s, a duke in Normandy commissioned an entire wing of his estate for this practice. 30 nested beds, each paired with a falcon cot. Monks were hired to monitor dreams and record any visions of feathered origin. One such monk, in a marginal note, simply wrote, "Today, the lady dreamt she flew over a pudding. The falcon dreamt of mice. Possible shared symbolism." You let your head rest back into the pillow. It conforms to the shape of your skull, with a suspicious eagerness. Alaric explains that nobles believed synchronized sleeping with falcons could absorb the beast's instincts, a sort of nocturnal osmosis. It wasn't just about calmness, it was about becoming a bird in your dreams. Several nobles even wore winged cloaks to bed, just in case they started sleep flying. There's a record of one nobleman in 1421 who insisted that his co-sleeping rituals with his hawk allowed him to sense storms in his sleep. Another claimed she dreamt of courtly intrigue before it happened, though her falcon, confusingly, dreamt only of beetles. You peek up. Your falcon has begun snoring softly. You're not sure how it's making the sound. It vibrates in the air like a tiny accordion. Something about the rhythm of it. You can't quite explain, but your breathing matches it, unintentionally, and suddenly you begin to see how this entire absurd idea might have spiraled into tradition. You imagine being a noble, centuries ago, shut away in a drafty castle with too much money, too little sunlight, and a pet hawk who always seemed calmer than you. Why wouldn't you try sleeping like it? Why not build matching nests and lull yourselves into tranquility, one synchronized sigh at a time? Of course, the nobles took it even further. One diary describes a baron who built an indoor dream aviary where falcons and humans could sleep communally under a domed ceiling painted like the night sky. He even hired minstrels to play panpipes at midnight, allegedly in the falcon's favorite key. Spoiler, the falcon hated it. Another noble, perhaps the most extreme, wrote that he refused to dream alone. He employed 6 falconers to rotate shifts, ensuring at least one bird was always asleep nearby. If the falcons didn't nap, neither did he. He died tired. You close your eyes. The cradle above you sways. The scent of lavender deepens. A wind you can't feel stirs the air. And in that moment, you begin to slip. Not into sleep. Not yet. But into the exact liminal space the nobles spent centuries chasing. The edge of dreaming. The near sleep where nothing makes sense and everything feels possible. For a brief second, you think you can hear the falcon dreaming. It's making little warble clicks, like a song played backwards underwater. Your body mirrors it. You twitch your leg. Somewhere far away, you think a bell rings, but no one moves. You're being lulled into a trance by a bird in a hammock. You don't even care, because in this room of silken nests and cradle-snoozing falcons, sleep feels less like a thing to chase and more like something that gently lands on you, soft-footed and weightless, feathers brushing your shoulders. Alaric whispers from across the room, "Try to follow your falcon's breath." You do, and just before you cross over, you swear the bird sighs. You wake up without meaning to. There's a rustle, soft but distinct, and the delicate creak of rope above you. Your eyes open to the cradle swaying gently, its feathery occupant now perched and staring directly at your face, wide awake, judgmental in the way only birds and librarians can manage. You snored. Alaric whispers nearby. It looked confused. You sit up, slower than usual, the cushion beneath you now warmed and shaped like a memory. The room still carries that deep scent of flour-soaked linen and sleeping animal, but something has shifted, a change in the light. The hush has become expectant. "Come," Alaric says, as though you're late for an appointment in another dream. You follow him through a low archway into a small, round room. One falcon stands here, solitary, atop a pedestal of polished wood. Its feathers are snowy white. It does not blink. Alaric nods toward it with reverence. This is the somniatress, the dream falcon. You try not to laugh. He's serious. Apparently, some noble households went even further in their obsession with falcon-induced sleep, not just through training or tonics or synchronized breathing, but through the elevation of a single bird, revered almost like a monk or mystic. They believed that certain falcons were born with the ability to usher humans into better sleep. That these birds weren't just animals, they were dream guides. Historians still argue whether any of these dream falcons truly existed, Alaric admits, hands behind his back, like a headmaster about to lecture you on pillow ethics. But this one's been in our family records for generations. The falcon eyes you like, it knows your browser history. According to legend, this bird, or at least its spiritual predecessor, once slept beside a prince who suffered from violent nightmares. After a month in the falcon's company, the prince began reporting vivid, peaceful dreams of sky cities and silent oceans. The court declared the bird sacred. It was fed figs, anointed with rose water, and eventually given its own bedroom. You look around. Yup. This bird has better housing than most modern apartments. There's a velvet cushion, gilded mirror, a tiny shelf with what appears to be scrolls. Are these for reading? Do falcons read? You've stopped questioning things. Apparently, nobles would sometimes make pilgrimages to dream falcons, paying vast sums for just one night in their presence. Records mention sleep-deprived knights crossing dangerous roads for the chance to nap beside one of these birds. One duchess supposedly traveled 300 miles just to receive the falcon's blessing, which consisted of the bird pecking her forehead and sneezing. Alaric gestures for you to sit cross-legged on a floor cushion. You do. The dream falcon cocks its head slightly, then hops closer. This part, Alaric murmurs, is where the falcon decides whether or not to soothe you. You're 90% sure this is a scam, but also 10% sure the falcon is reading your aura. It leans forward, beak inches from your nose, and lets out a quiet chuff. You blink. A sudden stillness settles over your limbs. Not sleep, not yet, but a heavy, cotton-wrapped stillness that reminds you of late-night train rides or long baths in candlelight. Your thoughts slow down. Your breathing lengthens. The falcon closes its eyes. So do you. And in that twilight zone between memory and hallucination, you see something strange. Yourself on a cliff, wearing a very expensive medieval cloak, falcon perched on your arm. The bird looks outward, eyes full of stars. You follow its gaze, and in the distance, a vast moonlit field unrolls like fabric. No footsteps, no roads, just silver and sky. You open your eyes. The falcon is still staring. Sometimes, Alaric whispers, they dream with you. If you're very lucky. Was that a shared dream, or a side effect of the lavender haze still lingering in your lungs? Falcon dreaming became a serious fad among nobles for over a century. Entire manuals were written on avian projection, the theory that certain birds could guide a sleeper's subconscious flight paths. One such guide, Somnus Pluma, details dozens of techniques for inducing shared REM cycles with falcons, including deep breath synchronization, dream trigger incense, and sleeping on the opposite side of the room from the moon. Naturally, others took it even further. A Hungarian countess reportedly constructed a circular sleep chamber painted entirely with falcons in flight, each representing a different type of dream: prophetic, erotic, melancholic, comedic. She would sleep under the bird she hoped to dream with. Her favorite was Falco rhesus, the laughter hawk, which, according to her journals, once made her dream of a nobleman slipping on a turnip. Meanwhile, a lesser-known noble in Flanders tried to train a bird to enter people's dreams via whispered phrases repeated at midnight. He died broke and mostly ignored, but his notes suggest he was onto something. You know, aside from the dream invasion bit. You rise, slowly, your muscles unsure if they're made of bone or candle wax now. The dream falcon gives a final blink, then hops back to its perch as if to say, "We're done here." Alaric nods approvingly. You passed. You're not sure what test you just took, but frankly, you'll accept the passing grade. The room seems even quieter now, like it's exhaled. Or maybe it's you. And though you're awake, you carry that silver field in your mind, like a folded map tucked behind your ribs. Falcon dreams, it turns out, don't always wait for sleep. Sometimes they perch on your shoulder while you're still standing. You walk in silence now, shoes soft against the flagstones, still a little dizzy from whatever just happened in the falcon's boudoir. The hallways here have grown darker. The torches dimmed to a flickering whisper. You feel like you're inside a cathedral designed by someone who got distracted halfway through and just added bird perches everywhere. Alaric motions ahead. This next room is not for everyone. He stops before a thick wooden door with metal studs, carved into the wood in Latin, somnus per simulationem, sleep through imitation. You hesitate. He pushes the door open. Inside is chaos. Not loud chaos. Not messy, explosive chaos. No. This is the tidy, unsettling kind. The sort where every detail is meticulously wrong. The room is lined with nobles, sort of. They're mannequins, dressed in authentic medieval sleepwear. Nightcaps, lace cuffs, even tiny velvet slippers. But every mannequin has a falcon mask. Bird-faced nobles. You blink. Nope, still there. Alaric is already stepping between them, as if this were perfectly normal. They called it behavioral mimicry sleep training. The idea was that if falcons slept better than humans, then maybe humans just needed to act more like falcons. Of course they did. Historians still argue whether this was a medical theory or just rich people playing dress-up. He adds, each mannequin is posed in a specific sleeping position, one perched on a padded pole, another curled in a clawed crouch atop a mossy branch replica, a third tucked into a nest of velvet-lined hay. Small bronze plaques explain the positions. The winged ball, beak to breast stillness, the night glide. You're not making these up. Someone else already did. Alaric hands you a small feathered robe. Nope, but he insists. Try the posture, just for a minute. See how it feels. So, with minimal grace, you kneel awkwardly into a circular cushion labeled the cloaked hover. Tuck your arms to your sides and bow your head until your chin touches your chest. You feel like a yoga pose designed by a goose. And yet, it's weirdly calming. You feel your spine decompress, your shoulders relax, your brain, so recently flooded with falcon dreams and lavender euphoria, slows down again. These nobles weren't entirely wrong. The physical positions of sleep do affect how deeply we rest. Even today, sleep scientists argue about whether fetal, supine, or side-sleeping postures optimize REM. So it's not totally bonkers that medieval nobles tried falcon-inspired sleep yoga. Some of them took it further. Alaric shows you a book, The Somnolent Aviary. Inside, ink sketches of nobles wrapped in feathered cloaks, blindfolded like owls, with gentle weights tied to their arms so they'd simulate the hanging rest of birds on branches. A marginal note reads, Lady Alswith reported dream of mouse buffet. Encouraging result. One German baroness allegedly commissioned a full-body falcon harness, a kind of sleep exoskeleton, that held her in perch stance overnight. The result? She slept 8 hours, woke up, and then fell directly into a wine barrel. You try another pose, the roosting sentinel. It's just standing perfectly still with your eyes closed. You're skeptical. You last 30 seconds. Alaric nods. It's more effective if you haven't eaten 3 wheels of cheese first. One final pose draws your eye. The mid-flight spiral. A hammock hangs from the ceiling, twisted like a helix. You're meant to lie in it sideways, arms tucked, swaying gently as if gliding on air currents. Supposedly, the Duke who invented this slept for 2 days straight and dreamt of a golden egg that granted wishes. His physician told him to hydrate. You lie back into it anyway. The sway is real. The tension in your shoulders leaks out into the fabric. The motion is subtle, but consistent. You understand, viscerally, what they were chasing. The animal logic of sleep. No clocks, no rules, just instincts. And in this quiet, absurd little room of aristocrats pretending to be hawks, something about the silliness becomes sincere. Because deep down, these nobles weren't mocking birds. They were envying them. Envying their peace, their freedom from worry, their silent, absolute descent into slumber, free of politics, war, or court gossip. They didn't want to be falcons. They just wanted to sleep like one. And who could blame them? You think of your own sleep, how often it slips away from you, eaten by blue light, stress, or some dumb thing you said in 5th grade. And you start to understand why someone might dress like a falcon, lie in a hay nest, and hum quietly to simulate wind. Maybe it wasn't science. Maybe it wasn't magic. Maybe it was just hope. With feathers. You get up from the spiral hammock, bones soft and rubbery, brain buzzing like a lullaby. Did it work? You ask. Alaric shrugs. Most still woke up tired, but they woke up different. You exit the room of bird masks and noble mannequins with a strange peace tugging at the corners of your mouth. And behind you, in the silence, one of the falcon-masked dummies shifts slightly in its perch. Or maybe it was just the breeze. By now, you're not sure what time it is, or even if time exists inside this gently mad estate. The walls hum like lullabies, the air has grown thicker with sleep itself, and you have the distinct sensation of dreaming with your eyes open. You pass through a curtained arch and find yourself in another chamber, this one low-lit and hushed like a confession booth. A round table dominates the center, and around it sit 7 mechanical falcons. Yes, mechanical. Brass wings, glass eyes, beaks that tick softly as they pivot in your direction. Alaric smiles. Welcome to the clockwork aviary. Of course. Apparently, when nobles realized that live falcons didn't always perform on command, and that shockingly, birds get tired of being lullaby dispensers, they turned to the next best thing, early sleep machines. These automata, Alaric explains, were created to simulate the soothing presence of a falcon, with varying results. Each falcon here has a function. One flutters its wings gently, powered by a crank beneath its perch. Another releases puffs of lavender-scented air. A third emits soft, rhythmic chirps that sound a lot like a metronome trying to flirt. You sit down, because clearly this is happening, and Alaric winds the largest automaton. Its gears groan. Then it speaks. Not words, just a repetitive, cooing sound that almost sounds like reassurance in bird form. The nobles who designed these machines believed that if they couldn't have the real falcon sleep effect, they could engineer it. Clockmakers and court inventors went wild with the idea. Bird-shaped music boxes, fluttering ceiling-mounted wings, mechanical claws that gently tapped in patterns meant to mimic the heartbeat of a resting bird. Historians still argue whether these were purely for sleep, Alaric adds, or whether they doubled as status symbols. You eye a falcon with ruby-studded feathers and suspect the answer is both. One nobleman, Duke Henri of Provence, allegedly commissioned a life-sized mechanical falcon with an internal water organ. It sang lullabies in 4-part harmony and was once mistaken for a real bird by a visiting ambassador who promptly fainted. But not all automata were majestic. Some were cursed. You're shown an archive sketch of the so-called sleep pecker, a wooden falcon that gently pecked a nobleman's forehead every 20 minutes to simulate the light nudge of avian comfort. He eventually banished it after it broke his nose during a thunderstorm. Then there's the Talon Whisperer, a glove with extendable fingers shaped like claws, supposed to help lull one's spouse to sleep by scritching the scalp in falcon-like patterns. It did not catch on at all. You reach toward one particularly graceful automaton, a slim brass bird perched on a crystal stand. When your finger brushes its back, it lets out a chime so soft it makes your eyelashes flutter. And just like that, you're calm again. It's surprising how close they came. Even now, centuries later, scientists experiment with sleep robots, pillow bots that simulate breathing, weighted blankets that mimic swaddling, apps that play heartbeat sounds. Maybe the nobles weren't mad. Maybe they were just the beta testers of the sleep tech industry. As you continue to observe the table, one of the automata suddenly flutters its wings in a perfect spiral, releasing a thread of warm air scented with crushed sage. You melt back into your chair, not fully asleep, not fully awake, but cradled by something artificial that somehow still feels kind. There were rumors, Alaric whispers, that some nobles even tried to implant these devices into beds. Full falcon-themed sleep chambers with timed bird song and programmable wing flutters. One count apparently died when his mechanical falcon short-circuited and launched a spark into his drapes. A sleepy tragedy. But the dream endured. Not everyone mocked these efforts. In fact, some members of the court reported that just hearing the clicks and hisses of clockwork wings helped them feel less alone at night, as if the bird, real or not, was watching over them. Your gaze shifts to a corner where a half-disassembled falcon lies in pieces. Beside it, a nobleman's journal page. Tonight she chirped at the hour I wept. I think she knows me. You feel a little heart-tugged by that. Falcons, in the noble imagination, had become more than sleep props. They were confidants, guardians, proxies for comfort and control in a world where most people, even the rich, were at the mercy of disease, war, betrayal, or really bad, drafty bedrooms. So why not trust a clockwork bird? You rise, your chair creaking softly. The mechanical falcons watch you go, or at least their eyes do. Not blinking, not alive, but part of something that once mattered deeply to someone in silk pajamas, whispering to the brass beak, "Help me sleep tonight, please." And sometimes it worked, or at least they believed it did, which, when it comes to sleep, might just be enough. You're yawning now, not just pretend, not performative. You're genuinely sleepy, and that's a little dangerous, because this next room is the quietest yet. Like a silence so heavy, it wraps around your ankles and tugs you forward. You push open a silk-draped door and step into a low-lit gallery. The floor is feather soft, literally. There's a layer of downy falcon plumage beneath your feet, washed, perfumed, and unnervingly luxurious. This is where they dreamed together, Alaric murmurs, already ahead of you. They called it the shared roost. You tilt your head. Sleepovers? Sleep seances, he corrects. Of course. Apparently, some nobles became so obsessed with falcon-induced dreams that they believed group dreaming might be the key. If one falcon could lull a person into peaceful slumber, maybe an entire chamber of synchronized sleepers, all imagining falcons together, could unlock deeper shared dream states. Historians still argue whether this was spiritual ritual, aristocratic boredom, or just a case of inhaling too much lavender incense. You scan the room. 7 low beds arranged in a circle, each with a carved wooden falcon perched above the headboard. In the center, a basin filled with water, floating feathers, and a single flickering candle. The walls are painted with scenes of flying falcons, wings outstretched across starlit skies. Each bed has its own mask, not the creepy mannequin kind. These are velvet sleep masks shaped like falcon faces, golden beaks, soft leather trim. You pick one up and it smells like clove and rose water. A little worn. Someone used this. Maybe often. Some nobles believed that the falcon was a bridge, Alaric says quietly, between the sleeping world and something higher. They would lie down together at dusk, don their masks, and begin the ritual. Here's how it worked. First, everyone was instructed to clear their minds. They'd chant a short verse about skyflight and soft feathers. Then, a trained falconer would release a bird into the rafters, letting it circle slowly overhead. This motion, paired with subtle sound, feathers rustling, claws tapping, served as the first lullaby. Next came scent. The room was misted with an herbal blend, lavender, chamomile, ash bark, and something called sky balm. No one knows what that was, possibly crushed petals from mountain blooms or just marketing nonsense. Finally, each sleeper would whisper aloud the dream they hoped to have. Not full stories, just a word or two. Flight, stillness, my lost brother, warm sun. Then silence. The idea was that the falcon, now roosting in the center beam, would gather their dreams like threads in its talons and distribute them in the night. And here's the wild part. People swore it worked. They woke recounting similar dreams, not identical, but thematically linked, flying over the same village, meeting the same silver-eyed stranger, feeling the same wind rush beneath invisible wings. Did they influence each other subconsciously? Was it the power of suggestion? Or was it simply a shared environment, the scent and sound priming their brains to follow the same path? We'll never know. But nobles began to formalize the ritual. They wrote dream diaries in matching leather tomes. They held monthly dream councils to decode their shared visions. One group of Hungarian counts even drafted a map of an imaginary falcon-ruled kingdom they all claimed to have visited in dreams. Avestria, land of the Golden Roost. One lady chronicled an entire romantic saga involving her dream self and a talking kestrel named Bertram. It lasted 12 dreams. He broke her heart in a windstorm. She never participated in the roost again. It got even stranger. Eventually, some nobles stopped bringing live falcons and started using decoys, just to see if the magic still worked. Sometimes it did. Other times the dreams were darker, heavier. One duke reportedly dreamed he was stuck inside a falcon egg, unable to hatch, for what felt like years. So they went back to the real birds. Your eye catches an old tapestry on the far wall, almost faded to beige. It shows 7 sleepers, masks in place, while above them, a massive falcon unfurls its wings across the sky like a god. In its talons, strands of gold thread dangle down into each dreamer's forehead. Delicate, isn't it? Alaric whispers. The idea that dreams are not just ours, but connected, threaded through by something winged and watching. You sit on one of the beds. The mattress is stuffed with down. The pillow cradles your neck like a lullaby in physical form. A mask rests beside you. You pick it up. It's lighter than you expect. The fabric hums faintly from the warmth of the room. You hold it against your face, just to test, and for a moment, just a breath, you feel the ghost of a sky beneath you. Did any of this work? Well, nobles kept coming back. There are records of regular roosters, yes, they called themselves that, returning year after year to recreate the shared dreaming. Maybe it wasn't sleep science, maybe it was ritual, community, the comforting repetition of an elaborate bedtime story where you and your friends pretended that your dreams mattered, that they connected, that someone or something with feathers was guiding you. And now you're here, not a noble, not a falcon, but someone seeking sleep, tangled in history, lying quietly among imagined wings. The candle in the basin flickers. The air in the shared roost holds still. And somewhere above, in rafters long since emptied, maybe something feathered still listens. You slip out of the shared roost with a kind of reverence. Even the creak of the door feels like an apology. You're deeper in the manor now, deeper into history, deeper into the noble obsession with falcons and the sleep they never quite achieved. The next corridor is long and dim, its only light coming from fireflies sealed in delicate glass orbs, bobbing slightly from chains overhead. They flicker in a lazy pulse, like a heartbeat, and you catch yourself matching your breath to their rhythm. Alaric is still with you, though quieter now. Or maybe you're quieter. This, he says softly, is the hall of failed sleep. Ah, finally, honesty. Because for all their birds and baths and velvet-wrapped rituals, the truth is that nobles were often terrible sleepers. There were too many things clawing at their brains. Political intrigue, peasant revolts, spouses with daggers hidden in their slippers. And so, this hallway became a gallery of last resorts. You pass displays of bizarre and increasingly desperate sleep devices. One is a helmet lined with owl feathers and stitched with copper wire, meant to conduct moon dreams, whatever those are. It's shaped like a melon and smells faintly of regret. Next, a feather-filled hammock suspended over a trough of warm milk. The idea? Gentle rocking plus milk vapors equals sleep. In practice, spilled milk and several lawsuits from lactose-intolerant barons. One noblewoman had a bed constructed that slowly rotated throughout the night, supposedly simulating the arc of a falcon's flight. It made her violently dizzy, and she vomited on her husband. Twice. Historians still argue whether this spinning bed was a symbol of innovation or just a particularly committed prank by a court carpenter. You pass a series of framed parchments, dream logs, written in cramped, night-addled script. Still awake. Bird watched me for hours. I blinked first. Tried crushed poppy seeds. Dreamed I was the falcon. Terrifying. Servants played 127 falcon calls on loop. One started speaking Latin. Cannot confirm dream or possession. The nobles were, in a word, spiraling. And the falcons, well, they weren't helping. One infamous count, desperate for sleep, had his aviary relocated to his bedroom. 30 falcons. 30. At first, the soft flutter of wings soothed him, but then mating season arrived, and so did the screeching. Another duchess ordered a falcon to be trained in the silent glide. It was meant to circle above her canopy bed all night without a sound. The bird lasted 3 nights before landing directly on her face and stealing her sapphire earrings. The noble approach to sleep was increasingly unhinged. They built feather fountains, invented wind chimes tuned to falcon cries, even convinced monks to chant falcon-themed lullabies. You see a book titled Canticles for the Beaked Guardian, bound in cracked leather. It contains lyrics like, "O taloned peacekeeper, winged balm, a light upon my soul with calm. Catchy. Yet no matter how elaborate the attempt, the nobles kept returning to the same problem. Sleep isn't something you command. It's something you allow. And no amount of trained birds or rotating feather cradles could force the mind to surrender. At the end of the hall, you reach the largest door yet, embossed with gold, shaped like an enormous falcon's outstretched wings, and flanked by 2 statues holding sleep masks and little cages. "Final stop," Alaric says. "The dreamer's folly." You raise an eyebrow. "It's not a room," he clarifies. "It's a person." And the door creaks open. Inside is a chamber unlike the others. Dark. Still. The air feels paused. A figure sits at the far end of the room, cross-legged, shrouded in dusty robes and feathers. A mask covers their face, half human, half bird, not mechanical, not royal, just still. According to legend, Alaric whispers, this was the first noble to try Falcon sleep, the one who began it all. Historians still argue whether this person, no name ever recorded, actually existed. Some say it was a monk-turned-noble. Others think it was a woman pretending to be a man, hiding behind the bird mask and whispering sleep teachings to the elite. But the story goes like this. They watched a falcon sleep, hour after hour, day after day. They mimicked its breathing, matched its posture, let their mind slow down to the pace of wing beats and blinking eyes. And eventually, they fell into what they claimed was true sleep, not dreaming, not unconsciousness, something quieter, deeper. They taught others, but as with all things noble, it got distorted, ritualized, monetized, turned into performance. Eventually, they retreated here, alone, surrounded by feathers and quiet. You walk closer. The figure is unmoving, a waxwork maybe, or a preserved body still posed in peace, a museum of sleep. In front of them is a journal, cracked open to the last page. Sleep cannot be hunted, only befriended. The falcon did not teach me to sleep, it taught me to wait. You exhale. Deep. Software. Maybe that was always the lesson. The nobles tried to conquer sleep, dress it in velvet, lure it with birdsong and warm milk. But sleep isn't a prize, it's a guest, and sometimes it arrives only after you've stopped trying so hard. You glance one last time at the figure, then turn. The door creaks shut behind you, and the fireflies in the hallway seem slower now, drowsier. Like even they've gotten the message. No more tricks, no more fluttering. Just the stillness that waits when the trying stops. You've been walking for what feels like hours now, though the floor beneath you remains padded in soft feathers and the light hasn't changed. That's the thing about this place. It doesn't obey time. It just cradles it, swaddles it like a noble babe who refused to nap without at least 2 falcons on standby. Alaric's footsteps are barely audible now. Either he's giving you space, or he's faded into some shadowy part of the manor, letting you finish this last stretch on your own. You find yourself descending a spiral staircase, the walls narrowing as you go. Not claustrophobic, just intimate. The kind of place where secrets are whispered, where you let your shoulders drop and stop worrying whether the pillow's been fluffed by a peasant with proper titles. At the bottom is a round chamber, stone walls, no windows, just a single cot, a low-burning brazier, and a falcon, alive this time, perched calmly on a stand. It tilts its head when it sees you, not startled, just aware. This is the real end of the noble experiment. You've walked through gilded cages, dream rituals, perfumed pillows, spinning beds, Falcon lullabies, group hallucinations, and desperate prayer chants, all of it building toward a single truth that now sits before you in this quiet chamber. The Falcon wasn't the sleep aid. It was the mirror. You sit on the cot. It's simple. Straw-filled. No tapestries. No masks. Just you. The soft hum of the brazier and the rustle of feathers from your silent roommate. This chamber belonged to a woman named Lady Annalisa of the Weeping Orchard. Strange title, even stranger story. She was the last noble on record to give up the Falcon sleep rituals entirely. She didn't denounce them, didn't call them foolish. She just left the manor one day, bird in tow, and built this room beneath a small monastery. She lived alone here, meditating beside her Falcon, sleeping when her body asked to sleep, eating when hungry, dreaming rarely, but peacefully. Her only written words? It never wanted to help me sleep. It only wanted me to be still. Historians still argue whether Lady Annalisa was enlightened or just exhausted beyond all reason. One theory suggests she faked her own death just to finally nap in peace. But her Falcon remained, and this bird, you glance again, is her descendant. Supposedly trained in no tricks, no glides, no lullabies, just quiet presence. You lie back on the cot. The stone beneath is cold, but the brazier's heat rises in slow waves. The Falcon doesn't move, doesn't blink. Its presence is like gravity with feathers. You let your breath settle. There are no monks chanting here, no nobles whispering their dream hopes. Just you and an animal that has no concern for royal titles or scented linens. Your eyes flutter once, then again. The Falcon closes its eyes. So do you. You understand now why they tried so hard. The nobles, the priests, the heiresses with scented masks, and the dukes with journals full of sleep commands. They wanted to feel what you're feeling now. This lightness. This moment when your body lets go of the idea of control. They dressed it up in rituals because that's what humans do. We make museums out of mysteries. But falcons don't need museums. They perch, they breathe, they wait. And sometimes, in their stillness, they show us what we've been missing while trying too hard. Your fingers twitch once, a half-dream forming already. And somewhere behind your eyelids, wings rise. So now, dear dreamer, just let yourself drift. You've walked the long halls of feathered obsession. You've stood beside nobles too rich to rest, and falcons too free to care. You've seen how hard humanity tries to grab hold of sleep, when sleep was always meant to arrive gently, like dusk on soft hills. Let go of the rituals now. No more gilded beds, no more rotating pillows, no more perfumed night masks or softly muttered falcon chants. Let your body grow heavier. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of feathers brushing sky. There's no story left to chase, no falcon left to train. Only stillness. Only that quiet room deep underground where you finally stopped trying to command sleep and instead welcomed it. So wherever you are, in your bed, on a couch, curled in a quiet corner of the world, close your eyes now. You've earned this. Let the falcon keep watch, and let the dreams take wing. Good night.